Yeah, I still don't see Mary.
Well, let's go ahead and start because we have a full agenda, Dan. Okay, so I will call the meeting to order for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. It's 3 o'clock and we'll start with a roll call. Amy, if you would do that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Start with the roll call. Chair Watkins,
Present.
Board Member Schrader. Here. Board Member Mazzano,
Here.
Board Member Browning,
Here.
Board Member Modi,
Here.
Board Member Rickert, and Board Member Commenti.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we will have a pledge of allegiance. I will stand and everybody can just do their own back there at their location. So I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you, and hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have a real flag and we can all be able to see it at once. So Dan, would you introduce those staff members who are present?
Yes, I'd be glad to. And I see Board Member Rickert has joined us, so welcome. And I'm Dan Little, Executive Director for the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency. We have all of our staff participating today. We have Associate Transportation Planner Michael Cooker, Assistant Planner Eamon Johnson, and Sean Tejan, Senior Transportation Planner, Jen Pollum, Kathy Early, Keith Williams, Dan Wayne, all Senior Transportation Planners, and Jessica Carlson, our Chief Fiscal Officer, Amy Lindsay, our Administrative Assistant, and we also have available to us, if we need him, John Kenny, our Legal Counsel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move right ahead into public comment period, and this time set aside for any of the public to address the board on consent agenda or items that are not on the agenda. If you want to talk about the agenda item, we'd like it if you would wait till that agenda item comes up. And of course, we cannot take any action on matters that are not on the agenda. And since we may have several people talking and we have a very long agenda, we're going to limit the public comments to 3 minutes. And at the end of your 3 minutes, you'll hear a bell. Amy, would you let us hear your bell? You're muted, Amy, and it won't show up. Come on. We didn't hear it. Try it again. Gosh, we're not hearing. Do you hit it 3 times?
It's too far. It sounds like it's too far away from the mic.
Well, it worked. It worked during the practice call.
There
There
we
we
go.
go. Okay, so Michael, what publics do we have to talk on general items?
I currently see 27 attendees, but nobody has raised their hand for general comment.
Does anybody have a general comment, or if not, we'll wait till the actual item comes up on the agenda?
I stand corrected. I do have Ed Merrick, who wishes to be recognized by the board.
Okay, we'll recognize him for a general public comment and probably not on the salmon runner item, I take. So anyway, go ahead, Ed.
I'm going to go ahead and promote him to panelist so he can be heard. One moment, Ed. You're muted. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon.
Well, welcome, Ed. We can see you well on our screen here, so go ahead.
I can see you. Yes, I can see you, but the point of me coming on Zoom was to use a share function. And I spoke to Amy about this. Once I share, I'm not going to be able to see you. That's the technology on my end. But I'll be showing you, right now you should, if you enable my sharing, we can get started here.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, and what is your topic?
My topic is electric vehicle charging infrastructure in general.
Okay.
And it does have something to do with the Salmon runner because that's an electric vehicle, but it's a broader topic.
You should be able to share anytime.
Okay. Are you now seeing?
Yes, we see it, Ed. Go ahead.
Okay. And I'm sorry to be cut back from 5 to 3 minutes, so I'll try to talk very fast and just the general points. What you're seeing here is a map of fast charging stations in our state. And you are seeing it, correct?
Yes, we see it, Ed.
The orange dots are fast charge stations for general public use. And the general problem for people living in Shasta County, as you see, is the forbidden zone, this large area of eastern Shasta County and the rest of the state here. So I'm skipping ahead. There is a extremely high kilowatt charging network for commercial vehicles, but I'm not covering that today. They go up to 1 gigawatt, 1,000 kilowatts. The station will start with here. Is a Vittles restaurant. It's a fairly standard single charger sponsored by ChargePoint. No, we're getting Fox Peak Station. This is one of the major chains which provides charging to Northern California. This is the one I really want to bring to your attention. Anderson Safeway. This is the nearest major charging station to Reading. Reading, unfortunately, has only one single low power charger. And what it shows here is it's owned by Electrify America. It's a large chain. And there's 50 to 350 kilowatt charging. I'm going to skip a few photographs here. One of those pylons represents a 350 kilowatt charger. If you told me 5 years ago there'd be one of these only 20 miles from my house, I would have thought you were crazy. There's no reason, there didn't appear to be a reason for private vehicles to need charging this quickly. And I would have probably said something like, you could charge a bus with that. Gentlemen, you can charge a bus with that. That's a 350 kilowatt charger. A bus like the Salmon Runner could be charged in 60 minutes. If you wanted to fully charge it, but you wouldn't, which I'll get to when we get to the next station. The point is, even though that's technically capable of charging a bus, obviously the parking spaces are fit to the size of a car. It doesn't have the approaches, and it isn't a bus stop. So it's unsuitable for charging the Salmon Runner. And then skip several steps ahead, because I'm sure I'm burning my time quickly here. You notice there are already chargers in every bus stop you've got planned.
So your 3 minutes are up, Ed. So can you summarize your point here?
If you put one fast charger for your Salmon Runner, it should be at this location. That picture you're seeing of the Berry Patch restaurant, there are 4 chargers there already for customers. There's a parking lot right next to it for large trucks. When they put the chargers in, they put capacity necessary for a 300 kilowatt charger. But most importantly, this is in the middle of your route. You want to charge your bus in the middle of the route, not at either end. That is because it's a characteristic of all battery vehicles that it is both more damaging, less efficient, and most importantly, takes much longer to charge all the way to the top or discharge all the way to the bottom of the range. By charging in the middle of the route, whether at one station like this or multiple stations, such as I suggested in an article to the a news cafe, you will be able to bring the, just one more sentence, please. You'll be able to change this from a 7-hour route to a 4-hour route, effectively doubling the capacity of the same number of buses on the same route. Sorry to go long. Thank you for your time.
Okay, yeah, so Ed, your time is more than up on this.
I understand.
But we will give you another chance to address the salmon runner when we get to that item. So is there anybody else who wants to talk on public comments?
I do not see anyone at this time.
Okay, I will close the public comment meeting period, and we will move on to our consent calendar. And all of these items are going to be considered by one motion, and unless a board member wants to pull one of them. And since not everybody has an agenda, I'm just briefly going to describe them. Item 5.1 are the minutes from February 23rd and March 24th meeting. 5.2 is a future meeting schedule for the rest of the year for SRTA. 5.3 is cash disbursements. 5.4 is just the correspondence letters that we received since the last meeting. 5.5 is a continuing emergency declaration concerning the building repairs. Item 5.6 is an update on Shasta Connect transit services, and that has to do with Sunday service and ridership. 5.7 is the Transportation Network Company, TNC Access. And this is a new program. And what it really does is every Uber trip puts in like 10 cents into a fund, and it comes back, some of it will come back to SRTA, and we could get between $20,000 and $30,000 a year from this program. So we're looking into that. 5.8 is approval of our overall work program, our OWP, and it's a true up, and just a minor change of a $4,000 change for the year. And item 5.9 is the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, RTIP. And it's basically the city of Reading has asked for more time to do an amendment from Turtle Bay to downtown. And item 5.10 is recognition of May as National Bike Month. So may I have a motion?
I'll move. I'll second.
Okay, I got the motion by Leonard. I didn't catch who the second was.
This is Mark.
Mark, okay. We've had a motion and a second. All those in favor? Amy, if you would do a roll call, we need to make sure we have 6 votes for item 5.5.
Yes, correct. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Prater,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes. So it passes unanimously. We are now on to item 6, our executive director's report. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you. It's all good news. I have several things to report. Sorry if I get some background noise for the item on your consent. The building construction is going quite heavy right now, so you might hear some jackhammering in the background. I hope it's not too disruptive. On regarding stimulus funds for COVID relief, there is a package that we've been working with the California Transportation Commission on that basically will result in about $3 million in stimulus funds to our local agencies. Some of that goes through the State Transportation Improvement Program. Some of it comes through another program that we disperse directly to local agencies. Just a heads up that we got some relief coming. Some of it will go direct to public works departments for the cities and the county. And we'll be having a June meeting to look at how the specific actions on how to do that. And the other item is regarding a what's called a member designated project. You might have been reading a lot in the national news about an infrastructure bill. And regardless of all the controversy in it, there is talk of what used to be called earmarks in that bill. And those are set forth by our congressional members. And there was a quick process and a call for projects through Doug LaMalfa's office, where we were able to submit the Interstate 5, what we call the Cascade Gateway, for widening up to Shasta Lake for 6 lanes, and taking care of other needs regarding the trucks, traffic, and stoppages when there's I-5 closures up in the canyon. So because we had that project so far along, we were able to provide some very good information to Congressman LaMalfa's office. And I just received an email a half hour ago with an official press release from the congressman's office. And I'm happy to say that we asked for $15 million. We are the #1 designated project in the ranking of the congressman's project list of 4 projects, 5 projects, sorry, no other ones are in our region. But we're very thankful to the congressman, and his staff was excellent to work with. On the heels of that, for the same project, there's a federal grant program that used to be called Build Programs or Infra Programs. This acronym is called RAISE, R-A-I-S-E. Don't ask me what it stands for. It's fairly new, but grants are due in July. We are going to make a run at a grant for the Interstate 5 project for that, and we'll give you more information in June about it. The challenge with that grant is we need to be a little more innovative on the project. Also, we need to try to align with state priorities more. And it's not something that's hard to do, but the state wants to see more things that we're already looking at. Really, we need to develop ideas more about resiliency when there's Interstate 5 closures, innovation and technology, and something we're going to be talking about next, which is hydrogen fuel cells. And that and looking at that could very much align with state priorities. So we might include a component in this RAISE grant for hydrogen fueling. With that, I think that concludes my remarks. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Dan, so we're on item 7, which is hydrogen fuel transportation workshop. And Dan, you're going to give us an overview, and then you've got 4 speakers waiting in the queue, I hope.
Yeah, we're going to spend a little more time on this. This will be a little bit different. We're going to have a lot of private sector speakers to talk about hydrogen fuel cells. I gave you all a homework assignment. I don't know if you had time to look at a quick video that kind of does hydrogen fuel cell 101 that helps explain the technology a little bit better. But it really is time to start considering this for our region. As I get into this, I was by no means an expert a few months ago and still am not, but I've been talking to a lot of people and learning a lot. And I feel pretty strong that this is a very good opportunity, not just for transportation, but for our local economy. And hopefully by the time you hear these presentations, you will see what I am seeing. But whether you measure it by what's going on in the stock market or science or government grants, or what is even happening on the ground in construction, what's happening already in companies coming to the region, inquiring about land, the hydrogen economy is coming, and it's coming faster than people think. And I think we're in a real advantageous position to develop this hydrogen economy. Most of that is based on a lot of things that I lay out in the staff report. We're well equipped to produce hydrogen fuel. You don't have to have a pipeline. You don't have to import oil. Hydrogen's readily available. It has a ton of uses, but the heavy truck traffic and the strategic location in Shasta County to connect the urban areas to our south and to our north in Oregon and Washington and even British Columbia, make it such that that alone could create a huge needs. But there's so many uses for hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. The fuel cell is a technology, rather than burning the hydrogen is converted into electricity, and then that battery electricity runs different things. And it's kind of a common currency of energy. You can get from heavy trucks, or looking at shipping now, even aviation, cars, buses, but especially these heavy duty applications. It's really, I think, going to be one of the sources for the future, because pure battery electric power can only get you so far because of the sheer weight of the battery storage that's needed versus the hydrogen that then instead feeds the battery and charges the battery. Even now, you can buy little $100 units that charge your cell phone with hydrogen fuel cell power. The torch that's running around Tokyo right now and being passed around, that torch is hydrogen power. So, and backup power, there's really a lot of different applications for this beyond transportation. So the way I phrase it is, I really see this region as sitting on a modern day oil deposit that can be really fruitful for our economy and for other needs. And it just needs to be developed like anything else. And so at the end, I'll be presenting kind of a wrap up, but I have some very good speakers for you. I'll introduce them one at a time. It's going to start at a very high level. I've asked the speakers to go about 5 minutes each. We'll start at a very high level with about the technology and how it's used, and then kind of work our way down to the Shasta region, wrapping it up with Todd Jones, the president of the Economic Development Corporation. But Michael, if you could start, if you haven't already, elevating all of our panelists. We'll get them all up here, and then they can all be available for questions as they go. But the first is Keith Malone. He's from the California Fuel Cell Partnership. I'll let him explain better what that is, but it's really a consortium of mostly private and also public interest with a mission to develop fuel cells in California and beyond. And with that, I will turn it over to Keith to talk. Thank you, Keith, for coming.
And thank you for having me here. Good afternoon, everyone. Keith Malone with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. I am the team lead on communications and public affairs. I've got a lot of slides to share with you. Some of them I'm going to go through very quickly. And I know you're probably going to be like, wait, let's go back and look at it. I'm happy to follow up after this meeting individually with staff and/or board members to talk about the fuller slide deck. Dan gave me a couple of questions he'd like to see me answer. And Dan, if you aren't hearing me answering them, you're more than welcome to poke me in the neck and get my attention on it. So let me see if I can share the screen. And here we go. And here we go. So just let me know if you're having trouble seeing the slideshow at all.
We see it well.
Good. I'm going to turn on the full slideshow. Here we go. So the California Fuel Cell Partnership, we've been around for about 20 years now. We are a partnership of government agencies, private industry, transit agencies, and academia. And we keep everyone focused. When we first started out, this was all still a science experiment. So it was focused on getting the technology moving along. Now we tend to focus more on moving all the related technologies, fuel cell electric vehicles, hydrogen fueling infrastructure, and hydrogen production further down the commercial pathway. And I want to point out our membership because about half of our membership works both zero emission pathways, both battery electric and fuel cell electric. So embedded within our organizational DNA is the belief that you cannot get to that zero emission future unless you have both. And I'd like to call out a few of them. If you look at the California side of our membership, it tends to be the government, the academic, as well as the transit agencies. And the other members, really the private industry members, tend to be really internationally focused. We have members that are fairly well known within the hydrogen sector: Shell, Toyota, Hyundai, and Honda. And we have some others that might surprise you. Ford, for example, just came back into the partnership after being away for a number of years. Nissan is a member. GM is a member. We just welcomed into the fold Daimler Trucks North America. And we have others in the heavy duty realm, including Nikola Motors. Certainly Hyundai and Toyota are in the heavy duty realm. Cummins joined our membership about 1.5 years ago. And so we keep everyone talking, focused, and working together. And that is probably one of our underrated attributes as an organization. And so that's where we become a key resource to our members, and not just our members, but others outside of our membership, including your agency. So we can be of assistance and help you as you further explore the hydrogen and fuel cell pathway. On our website, we keep track of the number of vehicles and buses and hydrogen stations that are
Hey,
open.
Keith, can I
Yes,
interrupt you? I don't know
Sure.
if you mean to do this, but your presentation has the notes view and a next slide view instead of the full slide that you're talking about. So I'm just wondering if you could get the slide up there to make them easier to read.
Yeah, let me see what I can. I don't know why that's happening, and I apologize. And I am, you're going to be.
Hi, Keith. It's Wayne here. If you present again, I'll
Okay.
show you how to fix it.
Thank you.
Sure. On the top bar there, you see display settings with a down arrow.
Display settings. With
Very
There
top.
we go.
Yep.
Yep.
And then just swap that first one. Yep.
There we go.
There you go.
Apologies, everyone. Here we go. So we track buses, cars, trucks. Those are on the road here in California, the stations that are coming. A lot of resources available on our website, and I'm going to move through pretty fast. Our membership working together has developed strategy documents. For example, how do we launch the light duty market? That came out, the California roadmap emerged in 2012. These are some of the vehicles you see on the road today on the light duty side of the equation. More are coming, both cars and vans, a lot of announcements as of late. So for example, Stellantis, which is the merger of Fiat Chrysler and the PSA group, which includes Peugeot, they announced they're bringing a van to market, and soon after that, a light duty vehicle. But I really wanted to focus more on the transit side of the equation, because the fuel cell buses in California, we have about 20 years of experience, have really shown the value of this technology. So one of them is Sunlight Transit out in the Coachella Valley. And they really illustrate more than anything else the fact that fuel cell electric technology performs well in extreme temperature environments. So not just out in deserts, and we know, for example, not just Sunline, but Las Vegas Transit is acquiring fuel cell buses because they find they perform better in those extreme temperatures. But they also have been tested north of the Arctic Circle. And so you find agencies like SRTA in Ohio, which really loves this technology. AC Transit out of the East Bay, they've shown, remember, obviously with transit, you're moving people daily without interruption, and you need technology that works well. And they've been able to show more than any other agency the fact that fuel cell technology not only performs well, but it endures very well. In fact, one of their key stories that checks off a lot of boxes for a lot of agencies is they took one of their buses to Reno for the American Public Transportation Association conference. They went up and over the Donner Pass during a snow slurry. And really actually great story. Their COO, who started off as assistant director of maintenance, was not very happy about fuel cell technology when he arrived. Changed his tune really quickly, and now their mechanics get trained on everything. So he wants everybody to accept the buses, and the buses go out no matter what kind of bus it is, it goes out. They can handle all the routes, or nearly all the routes. One of the other early adopters is Orange County Transportation Authority, 10 fuel cell buses at the moment, but their station will accommodate upwards of 50. And other transit agencies are following. North County Transit District in North San Diego County, as well as Golden Empire and Bakersfield, have all put out RFPs for hydrogen fueling stations. I've also included a clip about SRTA, which is based out of Ohio. And the fuel cell buses have really paved the way for the trucking sector. And we're now in kind of the earliest stages. And it's not about proving the technology, it's about getting kind of things set and ready and tweaked. And we're already in the process across the state of building 3 hydrogen stations, and there's about 6 to 7 more that have been announced or in the planning stages. And in addition to that, we also have two rail projects that will be coming to market. And down below, you can see Caltrans as a street sweeper that is has fuel cell technology. But there's a lot of good news about the technology, about the durability, about the availability numbers. NREL, they have staff that have been tracking fuel cell buses for about the last 15 years, about 15 years of good federally collected data. Lots of good signs. The OEMs like New Flyer and Eldorado National, now known as ENC, are taking leadership roles in a way that they never have. There are also some challenges as well, but as my colleagues that will follow me from Toyota and Shell will show, there's a lot of good news as well when it comes to infrastructure costs. As I end my really quick presentation, and believe me, I can talk for hours about this stuff. I'm easily triggered. What was I going to say? There's a lot to be shared and there's a lot to be learned. But on the transit side of the equation, this is one of the sectors that has really proven itself. And that if you pursue this pathway, you have a lot of interested parties. Reading is a really kind of key geographic area in California, because not only for trucking, not only for your agency potentially, but Reading, a station there that also includes light duty, forces a conversation now with Oregon and Washington and even British Columbia. We're already talking to our colleagues.
Keith, this is
Great.
Chair Watka. I'd just like to ask one question. I don't
Sure.
fully understand. Are these total just fuel cell, or are they a hybrid electric battery vehicle and fuel cell combined?
So for the most part, when you're dealing with a fuel cell electric vehicle, in a sense, it really is a hybrid. So you have, in most cases, the fuel cells are the dominant system, but there are batteries on board that serve I'll call it a helper role that captures excess energy from the regenerative braking systems and the fuel cells, and it helps even out the flow of energy to the fuel cell stack.
Then would the batteries be charged at night with electricity, or would they simply be charged from the fuel cell?
Simply be charged during the operation of the vehicle.
Okay.
And I will add one other great attribute about fuel cell electric vehicles is that whether it's a car, a bus, or a truck, the fueling operations mimic what you already have. So in terms of behavior changes, not a lot of behavior changes are required for the agency and for the staff. Certainly it's new technology, but it's a fueling experience that's fairly recognizable to everyone.
Question for you, Dan. Are all 4 members going to stay on for questions at the end, or should we ask the board members ask as we go along?
I was going to ask your preference, Mr. Chairman. We could do it either way.
Well, I'd say if anybody has any questions for Keith, we ought to ask him right now, but he ought to stay till the end also.
Sure.
So any board member have any additional questions for Keith? Okay, so Dan, let's introduce your next speaker. You're muted.
That camera comes right on cue. So our next speakers are from Shell New Energies, Shell Oil Company, and Wayne Leidy, who we've spoken to before. And Tom, sorry if I mispronounce your name, Morris, and he is also with Shell. And this is more to talk about the what they're working on, but also the fuel dispensing side of it and what it looks like to manufacture the hydrogen fuel and dispense it. So with that, go ahead, Wayne, if you're starting. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And hi, everyone. Great to be with you. My name is Wayne Leedy. I'm the commercial head at Shell Hydrogen for North America. We sit here north of San Francisco, and so great to be talking with you today. I'll share my screen as well and use a few slides just as an aid while we go through this. Okay, so my first slide is the most important. It says, please don't make investment decisions based on what I say to you today. As we develop hydrogen fuel, we think of it, as Keith said, as being very familiar. The value proposition is essentially the same as gasoline and diesel. Drive your vehicle, whether it's a private vehicle that you own or a commercial fleet that you're operating, and do the refueling in much the same way as gasoline or diesel. A point of comparison, the opening discussion around public fast chargers provides a kind of nice comparison. A public fast charger, DC fast charger, might be 50 to something like 350 kilowatts power as a rate of energy transfer. A hydrogen fueling station is about 3,000 kilowatts. And so it's somewhere between 10 and 60 times the level of service in terms of providing a customer a fast fueling experience. Or said another way, something like 10 to 60 times the number of vehicles that could be supported through a fueling station as compared to a charging station. Hydrogen is tremendously flexible in how we produce it. It's ubiquitous, but it needs to be produced. We need to separate the hydrogen from some other element, oxygen in water or carbon in various feedstocks. All of these pathways can be decarbonized and can be from renewable resources. So as we think about developing hydrogen in the portfolio of products that we sell, we are focused on renewable and decarbonized hydrogen, part of the energy transition that Shell is trying to make, and in line with the energy transitions that society is trying to make and policy is calling for. So in addition to being a zero emission and electrified vehicle, we're working towards a zero carbon and renewable sourced hydrogen. And as has been mentioned, this diversity of production pathways enables sort of the right approach in each location. So as we think about Northern California generally, we can think about the kinds of resources and feedstocks and therefore pathways for producing hydrogen in the region that would be most advantageous. Of course, we're an energy company, and so we think about energy systems. Hydrogen as a decarbonized molecule starts to be able to couple sectors of the energy system and the economy. So most of what we've talked about is what we call hydrogen mobility, fuel into transportation applications. Hydrogen also is an important industrial feedstock into everything from producing ammonia fertilizers to refining oil and chemicals and producing steel. And also it can link to other parts of the energy system, the electricity grid, the natural gas grid as well. So as we develop hydrogen, it's also becomes important for the reliable and resilient energy systems for California. At Shell, we're developing the full range of what we call new fuels, fuels other than gasoline and diesel. What that means is we're quite objective, kind of like Keith mentioned for several of the members of the fuel cell partnership. My job is to make hydrogen as good as it can possibly be because it competes at our vice president level with biofuels and with charging of battery electric vehicles and with gas to liquids technologies, essentially. And so what that means also is that we're quite objective in where hydrogen we see has a strong use case, a strong customer segment, a strong value proposition, strong commercial routes to market, and where some of the other new fuels work better. This just gives you a sense of our current scope. This is a slide that's hard to keep updated with all of what we're doing. It illustrates that our activity is global. And I might point to a few things in particular on this slide. In North America, you can see most of our activity is in California, 2 refueling stations up in Vancouver. Most of the activity has been in building out the open retail fueling stations for passenger vehicles, light duty vehicles. We're now in a program of building out 50 more in California. So a constant pace of opening new hydrogen stations and constant pace of selecting which sites to implement hydrogen at. It's the evolving fueling network and trying to be responsive to where the next most urgent gap in fueling is. The red truck icons you see are those first heavy duty truck fueling stations. The first 3 are about to open in Southern California, serving the drayage trucks that move freight from the ports of LA and Long Beach. That was a first generation kind of refueling station for us. We've just begun the next generation in West Sacramento. That's a station that will serve car and trucks and also fuel the first freight locomotive. So it gives you a sense of the pace of development. Every few years, we seem to be developing double or triple the capacity at half the cost and opening up a new segment of fueling performance. A lot of good work from a team of more than 100 people here to deliver that kind of thing. And then a few other things just to notice, the hydrogen production facilities getting started, electrolysis and thermochemical conversions of different hydrocarbon feedstocks. And over on the right-hand side, the very early days of a global market. So a liquid hydrogen ship now in sea trials, large-scale liquefaction, some of the early steps that led to a liquefied natural gas market are now starting to happen by Shell and by others for hydrogen. This is a picture of our next fueling station, the dispenser design there. And as I mentioned, a program of continuous development that helps us to double the performance of that fueling station while cutting the cost in half. Importantly, also, it's meant to bring some confidence to the market. We do have the chicken or egg challenge. Which comes first? Customers who are confident in buying the vehicles, or infrastructure that customers vehicles? And so we try to coordinate that and give confidence to everyone to launch the markets. This is a picture of the Toyota Kenworth hydrogen fuel cell truck that will begin fueling at those first 3 stations out of the ports of LA and Long Beach. This is a picture of the 10 megawatt electrolyzer that we are midway through constructing in Germany. Gives you a sense of what that kind of facility looks like. And this is a picture of the intention. We're in feasibility studies for several hundred megawatt offshore wind and electrolysis in the Netherlands. So it also gives a sense of how fast scale is increasing. The largest of whatever it is seems to be changing every few months. 10 megawatt electrolyzer is the largest when it opens, and yet already we're talking hundreds of megawatts. That's it from me. I look forward to your questions now or at the end. Thank you.
Do any board members have a question here for Wayne?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could, I did have a question that even I didn't ask earlier. Wayne, what is the cost of that, like that 10 megawatt facility or what have you? I'm just trying to give the board members an idea that if there was a facility coming to this area, facilities like you're building in California, where you manufacture the hydrogen and can dispense it, is that a $10 million project or a $100 million project?
Yeah, the kind of private sector investment that would come to the region, the kind of capital that Shell or others would invest depends a bit on what is built. A lot of information on cost is available because a lot of the infrastructure has been built with some funding subsidy, grant funding from the California Energy Commission. So I'll reply to you with some of that public information. You would see that a smaller retail hydrogen fueling station might cost somewhere between $2 to $4 million total capital, and that a larger either multimodal like we're building in West Sacramento now, or larger truck kind of station might be $6 to $9 million. A hydrogen production facility, it really depends on how large it is, but might range from $20 million. And an example, an Air Liquide production facility being built now in Las Vegas, they have quoted $200 million.
Wayne, I would ask you a question then, just back to the basic. I'm familiar with like liquid propane vehicles that took their gas engine and ran on liquid propane. So there you go to a pressurized tank, you quickly fill it. So if I go in with a hydrogen tank, is that under a similar pressure? And do I fill in like 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's right. On board the vehicle, it is a pressurized gas. So what the refueling station is doing is pushing that gas onto the vehicle. The coupling is very user-friendly, but it's the reverse of a liquid fuel. So the male end of it is on board the vehicle, and the female end is the nozzle that makes a tight coupling. Early days, when we got started in this, late 90s, there was a person with full protective equipment, certified to do the fueling. These days, you can go buy a car, decline all the training, come to the Shell station, swipe your credit card, and fuel. No training needed. As you stand there listening to your car fueling, you'll hear periodic pulsing of the gas. And what's happening is a bit of communication between the vehicle and the station, verifying we're trying to push that gas onto your vehicle as fast as we can, but not over pressure or over temperature the tank. So that's what's happening. And then, to fuel a car with roughly 5 kilograms will take somewhere between 3 to 4 minutes, very similar to gasoline. To fuel a bus with maybe 30 or 40 kilograms, or a truck with up to 70 kilograms in, say, 10 or 15 minutes, similar to diesel, requires a much higher flow rate. And that's what we've just finished developing. So that next fueling station in West Sacramento implements the high flow components so that the fueling performance up to 70 kilograms is similar time to diesel. And then that station will fuel the locomotive with about 200 kilograms.
Wow.
Gives you a sense of kind of our basic challenge has been how to push that gas on faster.
Do any other board members have a question for Wayne?
I do. This is Mark Mazzano. It's my understanding that the cost of the fuel to the consumer at present is right around $16. I guess you could call it, if you compare it to a gallon of gas, which is in the $4 range today. Now, based on the mileage that you get out of it, I think that brings it down to about $6 a gallon, which is still pretty high for what we're used to. I mean, they're used to that in Europe, but here we're not. And the hydrogen powered vehicles It's also my understanding those are currently running around 60,000, more than a Tesla, the Tesla 3, I think. So what's the likelihood that the cost, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a lot of money to put the station here in Reading, but what's the likelihood of getting the unit cost down?
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Mark. We're in hydrogen, we are about a decade behind battery electric vehicles in introducing the vehicles and the fuel to the market and then scaling up. We're following a similar trajectory about 10 years, getting started about 10 years later. The kind of cost reduction curves are similar as well as we have seen in batteries. The fundamentals are there, economies of scale in the manufacturing, economies of scale in the components, et cetera. For the fuel, about half of the cost has been in the refueling station itself. So that was job number one for us. The other half is in the hydrogen supply chain. Over the last 6 years, we've doubled the capacity of the refueling station while cutting its cost in half twice.
Oh,
And so just, the product that we're just now starting to build can get us to the gasoline and diesel cost parity that you mentioned. The asterisk on that is, but it still depends on utilization. We still deploy a lot of capital to build it. So it's hard to price the hydrogen at parity until that utilization goes up. And that's usually what some kind of public funding bridges. When we think about the fuel cost to the customer, just rough math here, indeed, the retail price of hydrogen in California today is somewhere between $13 and $16 per kilogram.
right.
And you can roughly cut that in half to get an equivalent dollars per gallon. So $16 per kilogram would be like $8 per gallon. So it's roughly double the cost of gasoline today. Compare that to fast charging. Look around for the full cost of charging. The Tesla supercharger network is kind of the best proxy that's out there. That'll be about 34 cents per kilowatt hour below 60 kilowatts rate of charge, and double that, 68 cents a kilowatt hour above, which is usually something like a 250 kilowatt charge. So again, we're about 3,000 kilowatt level of service. Compare it to a 250 kilowatt fast charge, and hydrogen at $15 a kilogram is the same, is about 72 cents per kilowatt hour. So if the level of service desired is fast charging, hydrogen will give you 10 times the rate at about the same cost today.
Okay.
But again, we're trying to cut that down to gasoline parity and then cut it down further. The quick thing on the vehicles, it's essentially the same thing. And James from Toyota can probably speak more eloquently than I on how they're reducing the cost of the vehicles.
Okay, anybody else have a question for Wayne before we go on?
Yeah, Greg, I had a couple questions. When you had the slide up that said something about biofuels, what was I looking at? There was something green there. What kind of fuels were those? There it is.
That's a picture from Brazil. We have a joint venture called Ryzen, which is sugarcane ethanol. So you're looking at a sugarcane field being harvested.
Okay. I was just really curious. And then when you talk about biofuels, do you have any ability to use timber for this, or is that just not a possibility? Because, in California, we have a lot of dead or dying trees.
Yeah.
And it only makes sense to me that we could utilize some of this material for these purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, the diversity in how we produce hydrogen is one of its strengths. This middle column on this slide called gasification is also sometimes called thermochemical conversion. There's a whole range of specific technologies underneath that, pyrolysis and other. But essentially, you're dissociating the molecules. So you can take a carbonaceous feedstock. It could be trash bags that are destined for the landfill. It could be forestry waste coming out of the forests. You can put it in high temperature, oxygen starved environment, and those molecules dissociate, split apart, and make a syngas composition of hydrogen, carbon monoxide, other things. And then you process that syngas, we can pull off the hydrogen and the carbon comes out as a solid. And that carbon can be used to make carbon fiber composites or fertilizer back into soil. But the point is that's not going to the atmosphere. So so that, middle line there is quite exciting. The technology is just being commercialized. It's technically ready, but commercially it's just getting to kind of the pilot scale. And then it becomes, like any biofuel, really about the logistics of that feedstock. And so I don't know well enough, how forestry management and wastes coming out of the forest would be managed effectively.
Yeah, the logistics look to me like probably your biggest kind of obstacle. And then one last question, I would think that agricultural users might be interested in this kind of option, because I would think, they don't generally quote leave the farm they're not too far away. So if they had a stationary place they can refuel and everything, it might be a good application. So I just thought I'd mention that. I don't know if you've explored that at all, but might be a good opportunity to think about.
Yeah, thanks. I would just say, as we think about fueling with hydrogen, the same approaches as you see out there in the world for fueling with gasoline and diesel essentially make sense because it's so similar. So you could envision a kind of open retail fueling network accessible to everyone, and also perhaps some private depot fueling at the transit agency, fueling at the Amazon distribution center or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Dan, maybe we should go to the next speaker, and then if we have questions, we'll ask them at the end.
Yes, I'd be glad to. So the next speaker is from Toyota, and that is James Cass, and he's going to talk more about the vehicle applications. But as you'll learn and have seen, Toyota is more than just automobiles or small cars. It's also heavy equipment and buses. So with that, I will turn it over to James. Thanks for attending, James.
Of course, Dan. Just making sure you can hear me okay and see the full screen.
Yes.
Excellent. So thanks for the quick opportunity here. I'll just give a really brief overview, mostly on the mobility side of how we can utilize fuel cells for everything from light duty to heavy duty even as well. So my role as a business development manager, focused mostly on everything zero emission vehicles at Toyota, but specifically on hydrogen. So that of course is the focus for today's discussion. If I can get the slide here to move, there we go. So I guess the first question, where has hydrogen gone within Toyota? And it certainly was not something that started just a couple years ago, but really was a 30-year almost development now, starting in the early 90s, actually the same time as the Prius development. And you can see it's many different vehicles and generations and retrofits to finally get us to where we were just 5 years ago when we launched the first retail vehicle, the Mirai, which has already been discussed a few different points here. But just to show you kind of what we're looking at is the first vehicle on the right, which we unveiled in 2015. We had a global production capacity about 3,000 of those per year. And just kind of as Wayne mentioned, as far as kind of the stepwise change as you keep introducing new technology, in the current generation now we just started selling here in early 2021, was now a stepwise change by 10-fold production capacity, going to 30,000 vehicles per year. And of course, you see it's also a lot nicer to look at, that vehicle there on the left. A lot of good design improvements and improvements to cost reduction, to performance. And it really is actually one of the better driving Toyotas that are on the vehicle today when you talk to any folks that have these vehicles right now. Just wanted to kind of note that and share the light duty experience because it's very relevant to everything else Toyota does in fuel cells, namely in the heavy duty space, which I'll flip to go ahead and next for focus. And here, again, we're looking at truck platforms, but it's not a dedicated Toyota truck platform. We started from scratch, but working with existing partners. And in this case, you see all of these are Kenworth trucks. So working with additional Class 8 truck OEMs to integrate into their existing vehicles, but using our powertrain technology and fuel cell technology in them. So actually the first two trucks there, the blue truck and the red truck, leverage literally the exact same fuel cell stack in the car. And in those particular examples, we actually disassembled vehicles and grabbed as many of the components as we possibly could and created kind of these Franken truck prototypes just a few years ago to just show that we could scale the technology from vehicles into something like the largest trucks that are on the road today. So what we're going to be doing now, and actually just starting even within the last couple of weeks, is rolling out the first 10 trucks that will be going to actual existing customers here. So we'll have 4 different operators, including UPS, a couple local drayage operators, and our own internal fleet that'll be delivering Mirai and other vehicles throughout the region in LA. We'll actually be going into customers' hands for a 1-year demonstration supported by the California government. And of course, part of that is the fueling, which Wayne already spoke to. So this particular grant is supporting 2 of those stations. There's a 3rd one going as well in the port, and building off of 2 existing stations that we have today to support initial prototypes. So where we're going from here, those were based on the previous generation technology, but we've now actually started developing with the newest generation stacks, improved in all respects of performance and cost reduction. So this is kind of that first Kenworth truck that you see again going into a production intent vehicle, as what we announced here. So now going from just this prototype proof of concept into actual real demonstrations and production intent type platforms for these Class 8 trucks. We're also working with the Hino Truck Company. So it's a Toyota subsidiary also going into the Class 8 market because we can be flexible and working with multiple partners. Since we're not just doing a ground up platform, we have the ability to work with any of these Class 8 truck OEMs that are developing fuel cell vehicles and fuel cell products. So note that Toyota is not the only one doing this. There's actually just about all the main heavy hitters here in the States have some kind of fuel cell development program to noting that it needs to be part of the solution for getting these Class 8 trucks to a decarbonized and zero emission solution. I do also want to say that it doesn't stop at cars or trucks. There's also everything in between and larger. So here you see a couple examples that have already existing today, whether that's from buses and medium duty trucks. There's also using them for stationary power or backup power, as Dan alluded to before, but also think like forklifts. It was actually a very major success story here in the US, where I think there's in the tens of thousands of these actually in retail service at, for example, Walmart and Amazon warehouses today, because they have that uptime, that quick refueling, as opposed to things like battery swapping that maybe you have with those battery forklifts inside. Sorry, here, we'll try to get rid of the distractions. And of course, now there's marine as well. So it's going even larger from trucks and going to marine, to rail, and these larger and larger applications because of the modularity that we can see with fuel cell technology. So my last quick slide here, I wanted to keep this fairly brief, is just the key focus on collaboration. So we've kind of alluded to this chicken and egg problem, and collaboration is what really helps solve that. So that's bringing all the key players in the room, starting with the government and local AHJs as well. So of course, a huge partnership with the Shasta Regional Group here when looking at building out in Reading or other areas, but all the key industry players as well. So we as the OEM and work with other automakers, other partners from the infrastructure side, the fueling side, and the end user side, because we all have to be speaking the same language and understand all of our goals to know when to build out stations where and how we can roll out vehicles to support them. So of course, I think Dan kind of mentioned this before, but the Reading and Shasta area is a really key area when you think of launching beyond California and also a key freight hub within California. So you could have a localized light duty hub for vehicles or buses, but also enable that north-south corridor for heavy duty trucking to unlock states like Oregon and Washington and such. So certainly a lot of interest in unlocking that whole West Coast corridor, with you guys being right there in the northern part of the state. With that, I'll wrap up quick and see if there's any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you're there, but I have a question. If I could just jump in while we're waiting here. And James, maybe if you could stop sharing your screen, we can see each other better. And
let's do that.
And while you're doing that, my question was about the collaboration. I probably want to come back to Keith too, because he said poke him in the neck if he missed anything. And one thing I want to talk about is, why collaborate at the regional level, at this local level? Because I think there might be a common aspect of thinking, why not just let the private sector, and whatever happens, they compete. And, is there any real value in us as local agencies in a region getting together to, form a consortium or whatever that is with our economic development folks and our power companies to help this along? So, what do you see? How important is that value of a local agency trying to facilitate this? How much attention do you pay to that before you invest? And I know Keith has something as well, and I see his mic's hot. So go ahead and start, Keith.
I can give you a good example. When we developed the strategy document for rolling out light duty stations in California, we had everybody in the room except one of the key groups, and it was the local component. We had thought through everything. I think we come up with a really good foundational plan, and we didn't consider permitting and planning. I think had some of our newer members been there, like Shell, they would have brought with them experience from the development of stations. Sometimes you can't always know what everyone brings to the table. And so sometimes there's a serendipitous opportunity or a nature to bringing together all parties. And it could very well be that I mean, I can tell you every time we have gone into localities and when our station developers and our members go in, they learn more, they learn how to do it better, and they learn how to make sure that what we bring in is welcomed for any number of reasons, technical and otherwise. And so and also just for example, if we're going to bring in fueling infrastructure to the area, and because it would be considered both a remote station, perhaps a local station, but one of the key issues is throughput. And working together with local entities, perhaps we can make sure that we can build enough throughput to really support the station, not just for the truck traffic that might go through, not just for the transit agency, but there may be other opportunities as well. And I can't emphasize enough the role that Reading plays, not just for going north, but even going into the Redwood Coast. If you look at what goes on and talking to colleagues at the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, they've talked about the fact that in case of an earthquake, a fire, or a tsunami, they are effectively cut off. And so kind of their connections to Reading and other places are essentially key. And for them also to build their own resiliency. So I'll stop rambling and see if James or Wayne has anything else to add to that.
All good stuff, Keith. I think the only thing I would add is support in an area basically enables investment very quickly, because we've seen that barriers in an area means nothing gets built there. Nobody will go there because it's not worth the time, the effort, the additional time to make all that work. And honestly, if you look to the Northeast states, for example, it's a very different beast trying to permit something in the Northeast states. And we've been pushed back, I mean, literally years from wanting to do something in the Northeast states. And we still don't know when we'll be able to successfully launch there because of the locales and their permitting processes and the fire departments and such. So the support of a local region will basically determine where investment is made, because it can turn something into reality or something that just doesn't happen.
Keith, if I could ask a question, if we had a fueling station in Reading, could that truck, like the one pictured behind you, could it make it to Seattle without refueling from Reading to Seattle?
I'm going to let James answer that one.
Seattle's pretty far. Our current trucks right now, we say will go at least 300 miles, even fully loaded 80,000 pounds. I think recently some other trucks, even from Hyundai and some of their recent announcements, are maybe even 500 miles. So even our initial prototypes are going, a lot further than a lot of the battery trucks today. But you'd probably need another one called Portland to be able to get all the way to Seattle, get the network going.
Any other board members have any questions for any of the three?
This is Mark. I have a couple of questions. One, the internal combustion engine is the dinosaur that will leave us in the near future. And the competition seems to be between electric vehicles and hydrogen. And in my study of the electrical vehicle, in talking to people from Tesla, they're already looking at different ways to build their batteries because of the elements that they need out of the earth are limited. And so in the production of, I read somewhere, I saw it in that video that you can create enough hydrogen off the manure from one cow for a year. Is that accurate?
I don't know that conversion from cow to car off the top of my head. But on the fuel side of things, that's right. That the feedstocks to produce hydrogen are plentiful, renewable, diverse, as we talked about, and that the equipment to do those conversions don't require, rare earth metals or other materials that are scarce.
Wayne, if we were going to go along that same line, in order to produce an $8 equivalent hydrogen, and if we were doing it locally here in Redding, how much could a facility pay per kilowatt hour for electricity to produce $8 hydrogen?
Again, it's a good question that's hard to give a snappy answer to. There are three things that are important to that answer. One is the capital cost of that electrolysis facility, and that cost is also coming down very rapidly. So it's kind of like solar panels, where the first question is, where is it, to get a sense of the sun? And the second question is, when do you want it? Because the price tomorrow is so much cheaper than the price today. So the capital cost of that electrolyzer is coming down rapidly. The second is the capacity factor. What percentage of the time is that electrolyzer producing hydrogen? And oftentimes it's a very small percentage of the time. If you're trying to produce from the sun, it's 30% of the time or something like that. If what you have in mind is making use of some of the hydro resource, co-locating at a dam, using some of the renewable electricity resource that you have up there, then that capacity factor can get much higher. It may still make sense to not use it 100% of the time. You still want that electrolyzer as something of a demand response asset to the grid. Don't produce hydrogen when that electricity is needed for other things. But the result of those two things would give an answer to, what's the power price. I'll say we've investigated with a couple different entities up there and found that the apparent power prices could probably work.
Okay, well, we do not have a surplus of hydro here, and from 5 to 8 p.m. there's a shortage of electricity everywhere in California. So about the only time it's cheap is from 10 to 3. So anyway, that'll all have to work out. Any other board members have a question for any of the three? Okay, well, this was great.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just one more speaker, and it was last minute. I had Todd Jones come and just ask him to take just 2 minutes to kind of bring it all home to the local level. I said we were starting out at a high level. As I talked to Todd, we found out there's a lot of mutual interest between our organization and what he's working on. So I thought it would be great to hear from him.
Okay.
So Todd, if you would go ahead, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'll keep it very, very brief. This was actually great for me to hear the different perspectives from Shell and Toyota and Keith as well. So just a really quick overview. I know most of you on this call, and some of you already know about what's happening in this area besides this conversation we just had today. But just since January, we've had about 6 companies look to expand to Shasta County to do hydrogen fuel manufacturing and fueling. And a lot of times it also ends up being DC fast charging as well. And it is, like they've said, kind of a chicken and the egg. Some of these folks want to have some type of a fleet contract in place before they come. Other ones just want to build the infrastructure because we are in that strategic location. And those are kind of the 3 big factors that I see that come in kind of from a early, more novice perspective, that Strategic locations, probably number one. Availability and cost of electricity, natural gas, and water, all abundant in this area. We have those all here. And like everyone said, we're a really great location for this. So to connect with Dan just a couple weeks ago about this topic, and then hearing from Keith and Wayne and James about what that potential is, there's a lot of opportunity that we can have from an economic development perspective with all of you at SRTA to land some of these deals, because I think we can fit a lot of these needs. And to Supervisor Rickard's comments as well, one of those companies has talked about utilizing biomass to, I don't want to go through the technology because I'll probably stumble on my words, but use biomass and convert that into hydrogen. And there's other folks like we have here locally, Moss Energy, who has dairy digesters all over the country now. They're injecting renewable natural gas from dairy farms into pipelines, and you could buy that gas on a credit basis here in Reading, even if it comes from Visalia, and they're in that market to sell that. And you could have renewable natural gas converted into hydrogen. And with all of the incentives and the regulatory environment with low carbon fuel standards and cap and trade, you kind of have the golden goose there of fuel that's created from renewable energy that they're trying to limit the emissions on, and then turning it into something with zero emissions. So there's a lot of synergies. I don't want to go into too much more detail now because the speakers have covered so much of this very, very well, but there's a lot of synergies. And I think the one last thing, since all of you are elected officials in your municipalities, is that zoning in planning is an issue. When I first brought this to one of the municipalities, they don't really have a picture of how big the scale is. And these folks, again, they want to do manufacturing and fueling most of the time at the same spot. Some of them need as little as an acre. That's a semi-commercial place ready to go. And, talking to fire marshals, there's some worry about heavy industrial, general industrial, what that looks like. So just a lot of education needs to happen. But if you see some of these in person, I think we're a community that's willing to make these opportunities happen, and it's going to benefit all of us. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, but I'm excited, and there is a lot of interest in the area.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, some have offered to share their contact information. I think we'll post that on our website of the speakers who are willing to share that, so that those listening in the audience can contact these folks. And just to put a bit of a lid on this, and I know that there's a couple people, it sounds like, that have raised their hands and want to speak from the public. Just next steps for us. We already have money budgeted in our overall work program to look at this. And, there's a lot of moving parts with developing this. It obviously requires a lot of disciplines that are beyond just transportation. And so working locally with people like Todd and REU, and then bringing in private sector expertise, we could form like a consortium of sorts. We also contract with the Center for Transportation and the Environment, and they have real experts in this field. And, I think it just starts with a dialogue, and then we see where that goes and see where opportunities are. So like I say in the staff report, we're not saying where it's going to go in terms of that, but we're going to kind of play it out and see what happens, keep reporting to the board. And I want to emphasize too, that it's not just Reading that's a key site. Shasta Lake may have resources and want to participate in this, City of Anderson, and so on. So thank you very much for doing this workshop with us.
Okay, Dan, then we'll open it up for public comment. Keith, do we have some people queued up?
We have Ed Merrick and Sunrise Reading would both like to speak.
Okay, you have 3 minutes to make your comment.
Who would you like me to promote first?
Whoever came on first.
Okay. Here comes Ed. Ed, please be sure to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I hadn't planned to comment on the subject, but I think briefly the best way to comment on it or to look at it is to simply look at the 2 grants your agency made for the 2018 grant, which was accepted, $8.5 million for 7 buses and the required charging infrastructure, which due to drop in prices for both since then, probably more than enough. And the grant you asked for that was turned down, if I remember correctly, and I haven't looked at this one as carefully, it was for $20 million to produce charging infrastructure and 1 or more buses. And the main reason being that the charging, the fueling infrastructure alone was $15 million. And if I also remember correctly, that was not to create that hydrogen, that was just to dispense it. So on top of that, you'd be paying the very high, much more than $6 a gallon equivalent cost for hydrogen. Those are my main points on that subject.
Okay,
Thank you.
And really, you'll have another chance when we get to item 12. Okay, the next public comment.
Hi there.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you very much. It's just taking a second to get me going here. Hi, Dash Waterbury. Oh, I don't have, it's not giving me video yet. Here you go. Here's my beautiful face. Okay. Thank you, everybody. This is Dash Waterbury, coordinator for Sunrise Redding, climate activism group here in town. I was not able to be here for public comment in the beginning due to my work. So I wanted to voice that many of us in the environmental activism community, the people trying to address the climate emergency, are very, very excited as all of you must be about the possibilities within hydrogen and hydrogen fuel technology, and especially for the things they could do for our area. But we do want to voice that if we as a region begin to explore the production of hydrogen, we are going to have to start exploring making sure that that creation of hydrogen is done in a way that is reducing emissions. The entirety of this would become a circus act if the creation of this hydrogen was done in a way that's not sustainable. And in that case would make the use of hydrogen non-carbon emission friendly. So there are, as I'm sure many of you are aware, maybe all of you are aware, there are different gradations of how sustainable hydrogen production can be. There's what we call green hydrogen, has gotten the nickname green hydrogen, which is sustainable. And there is blue hydrogen, and we go down to gray and black. And so when we're starting to talk about these things, that it would be the forefront of importance, of utmost importance, to be exploring how to do this sustainably in the North State. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good point you make. Do we have any other public comments on this item?
Not at this time.
Okay, we will move on to the next item, and that's item 8. Has any board member attended anything that they need to report on according to Assembly Bill 1234?
I'll just report that in accordance with AB 1234, it's usually when we physically travel, but I will say that I attended the CalCog annual forum, leadership forum, which was on March 22nd and 23rd. And it was, as usual, very informative. And I appreciate that CalCog invited several staff members. It wasn't just limited to board members. So I was appreciative that I think several of our staff members were also able to attend, and it had several great panels of discussion. So that's my report.
Thank you, Kristen. Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 9, which is to approve the 2040 long-range transit plan. Dan Wayne, is that you?
That is him, promoting him now.
Thank you, Chair Watkins and board members. The final draft 2040 long-range transit plan has been completed and reviewed by regional partners and stakeholders in the region and is recommended for board approval. The plan includes various near, medium, and long-term strategies in order to increase transit efficiency and effectiveness. Near-term strategies are considered quick win activities the region can get moving on over the next 2 years or so. Mid and long-term strategies are threshold-based, meaning that the region may not be ready for these strategies until additional transit funding is available, until public demand for transit increases, and we see more transit-oriented development in the region. Few examples of some strategies that we can get started on in the near term are enhanced multimodal access to transit, including active transportation, realigning fixed route service to better match the real world travel patterns that we've identified in the study, revising the transit fare structure for low-income riders, expanding on-demand transit to meet the unmet transit needs at times and at locations when conventional fixed route transit may not be viable. Adding rural transit mobility options, which include a variety of strategies customized to whatever the needs are of smaller communities outside of the urban area. Presenting the region's various mobility services under the same banner with common information and fare payment available online, and consolidating or integrating any duplication of services and operations and administration that there might be, particularly among human service providers. I will add that applying these strategies in small increments in a piecemeal fashion over a large geographic area will not likely improve transit performance substantially. A critical mass of strategies and a scale to which they're implemented needs to be accomplished in order to achieve desired performance outcomes. Success means improving transit performance and meeting the public's mobility needs. However, we also need transit to meet the region's greenhouse gas emission reductions target. If we cannot meet our targets, or at least demonstrate that we're making every effort possible to reach them through our investments and programs, the region will be less competitive when seeking discretionary funds, not just for transit projects, but for other types of projects, including Interstate 5. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Do any board members have a question for Dan?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Or so are we open for comments, or do we still want to just have questions?
We will take comments or questions.
I just want to, share my appreciation. This is a lot of work, and I think the report reads very well. And I think it's a great start, and I look forward to seeing how our Reading short range plan, along with our rate study, or City of Reading, it's RABA's and short range plan to help implement some of these ideas or consider them. So thank you very much for the work that staff has contributed to this plan, and it looked like there was a lot of public comments, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, we had a good consultant and good response to the outreach efforts that we did. And of course, it is a long-range, high-level plan. And so some of these strategies need to be fleshed out, and that needs to happen in close consultation with RABA and our other regional partners. And the short-range transit plan is a perfect opportunity and means to do that.
Well, I also want to just add that I think that it's great that you had that it's inclusive of multimodal. We need to consider the first mile, last mile. We need to consider a lot of things that we probably haven't had top of mind in previous years. And going forward, I think we are having to relook at how we plan transportation. So thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, are there any other if any other board member have a question or a comment?
Yeah, Greg, this is Leonard, and I just would kind of echo Kristen's comments, but also thank Dan for the work on this. You know, it's always good to review our strategies and look at what can be done in the future. And I recognize that it may take, as you mentioned, you know, a little more synergy to get this thing moving and to really see some major improvements, but we need to continue to do what we can to make the steps. This community has always sort of resisted mass transit, and but I think we need to look at the different avenues that make it more attractive to people. So thanks, Dan, for the work on this.
Okay.
Do we have any public?
Yes, Chair Watkins, we have Ann Thomas and Ed, and I'll go ahead and promote Ann.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. There I am. Hey, I just wanted to, this is going to be a little bit cryptic, but I wanted to thank the board and the staff for the long range transit plan. There's a lot in it, like the multimodal is great. I like the way you do the sort of 3 different steps forward for any of the different phases and things that we're trying to achieve. But I also wanted to mention, we did already use this data to bring a major grant to Reading and Shasta County. I can't tell you what it is yet until the state announces, but we actually have already used the data presented in this report to bring that grant to Reading and Shasta County, and I look forward to being able to announce that in the coming month.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next public, is that Ed?
Yes, here he comes.
Hello, Chairman Watkins. First, I'd like to, can't hear me, can't you?
We can hear you, yes.
Thank you. I'd like to bring to your attention that I've submitted a written comment on this already. You several times said I could Zoom on this. My written comment has priority, and I'd certainly like that read in first. If you care to let me finish my comments from earlier, I originally planned on a 5-minute time frame, and I can complete them in that time. But if I'm only allowed one option, I'd certainly rather you had read my written comments.
Dan, do you have his written comment handy there?
Yes, we
Amy,
do. I believe we submitted those to the board members as soon as we received them.
Yes, I saw them.
I have one right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know your procedure. I thought that they were read publicly, it sounded like.
No, all the members have received a copy of it.
Well, I hope you'll take account of them, please. Would you like me to let me conclude my comments?
Yes, you may go ahead and have up to 3 minutes.
All right. And again, I need you to allow me to share that map.
You should be able to share, no problem.
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we see your map.
All right. And again, I do not see you. So if you need to contact me, it'll have to be verbally. What I meant to conclude my comments was bringing it back to the main topic, that is Shasta County charging generally. The real problem isn't for people going up and down I-5. The people who drive from Seattle to San Francisco have seen that that's filled. It's for people in eastern Shasta County that electric vehicles aren't a realistic alternative. What I'm suggesting is, if you can follow the cursor, you already have a bus line running to Bernie. I believe it's called the Bernie Express, with stops in Round Mountain. Those happen to be the exact locations of charging stations recommended by the Siskiyou group about 5 years ago, when they took the lead on making a plan for Northern California charging stations. The other two were approximately Shingletown and Old Station at the 89 junction. right where the cursor is now. Were you to install electric bus stops at those locations with associated charge opportunities for private vehicles at a very modest cost, again, comparable to what I was suggesting on the 4 stations on the Salmon Runner route, you would open up the possibility of all East County residents replacing internal combustion vehicles with $4 a gallon gas with electric vehicles with approximately $1 a gallon gas equivalent cost. Bringing it back to the real story about the question of battery versus hydrogen, which seems to you spent a lot of time on. There's just no way hydrogen is ever going to be competitive with electrical batteries and storage and grid energy or solar energy. And if you wait until you get fuel cell battery buses and keep running diesel buses, you're going to wait until you'll be able to call the Anderson Valley, where Redding's located, Death Valley North. That's just the reality of climate change. So thank you for allowing me to finish. And I really hope, if you read my comments, I suggest you send this back for further study to see whether you can get the electric buses practically running, as they certainly can be, done.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. And really, you're still jumping ahead to item 12. So,
well, I'm hoping that item 12 won't even be necessary because you'll decide to study electric buses and get the right answer.
okay. So are there any other public comments on this item?
Yes, we have Sunrise Reading.
Okay.
Sunrise, you are muted still.
All right. We similarly want to register our support for further exploration of the electric buses and the routes that they can do. And we also want to take this chance to voice our support on a similar topic that we weren't here to voice support for, which is the Salmon Runner, and finding more ways to electrify our transit, similar to what the previous gentleman was just saying. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I believe that concludes that item. So we're going to move forward to item 10, which is to approve the 2021 annual transit needs assessment and the unmet transit needs.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think you've taken action on item 9 to approve the plan.
So I'd like to move approval of item number 9.
Mary, I second your motion. This is Schrader.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded by Mary and Kristen. So do a roll call vote on that, Amy. Sorry for getting ahead of the game here.
All right, everybody. Let's start. Roll call vote. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
I believe there he is.
Board Member Modi.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it passes unanimously. So now we are on item 10, which is our annual transit needs and unmet transit needs. So Dan Wayne, you're back on, and Jesse, are you also helping him?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Watkins. As a recipient of Transportation Development Act funds for public transportation, CERTA is required to administer the annual transit needs assessment, which is a technical analysis combined with public outreach. Based on that and consultation with the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, we identify unmet transit needs and we evaluate them according to reasonable to meet criteria that were previously adopted by the board. So this process for this next year is complete, including the 30-day public review period and a public hearing that was previously held. Now, we do have a recommendation from the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, and we've prepared unmet transit needs recommendations for consideration by the board. In short, what those recommendations are no new or expanded services due to low transit performance this last year and over several cycles, a lack of unmet transit needs requests that were received from the public this year, and the ongoing impacts of the pandemic on public transit performance. It's further recommended that all current TDA funded services, that we maintain these, as well as all grant funded services that are being operated. And that any and all federal COVID relief funds that are available to the region be pursued and applied to help public transit service providers get through this difficult period. Longer term, it's recommended that we focus on the strategies that were identified and discussed in the previous long-range transit plan, and that we do that, as mentioned also before, in consultation with RABA and other partners, and flesh out those ideas through the short-range transit plan. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk about the ensuing TDA budget, which reflects these recommendations.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chair Watkins, board members, partners, members of the public. I just want to go over the Transportation Development Act, or the TDA budget, for those of you who are not familiar. And those of us who have been here for a few years, I just want to review some changes that we've made this year and a few key findings. So the TDA budget is comprised of two funding sources. One is the local transportation fund, which is the 0.25% of the sales tax in Shasta County. And the other is the state transit assistance, which is made up 50% on the fares and local support revenues of your transit operators, and then the other 50% based on the county population. So those two come together, and then they are it is CRTA's responsibility as the MPO to then find the appropriate ways to use these funds for transit, bicycle, pedestrian, and streets and roads projects. And those funds are also split by priority. So we have three, what we call off the top distributions, which come out first before any allocations to the jurisdiction's claimants. And that is CRTA's administrative needs as necessary, 2% for the bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and 5% for the coordination of services and community transit services, or what we call CTSA, which for us is provided by the Dignity Health Connected Living. So after these, we move on to what they call the transit claimants under Article 4. So for us, it would be RABA. RABA would give us their operating costs and what need to be covered. And then those eligible costs would be covered first. And then subsequently after that, and lastly, Article 8, which is for any other eligible uses, which typically goes to streets and roads. This is where that comes in. There's two conditions for this Article 8 or streets and roads. One, the population had to be under 500,000 in 1970. So, and it never changes in the future so far. So we're still good there. And then secondly, we do the due diligence of meeting the unmet transit needs, which is the process that Dan Wayne just went over. So we have, CRTA has to meet those two conditions before we can issue Article 8 funding to the streets and roads projects. And also any alternate projects like bicycles, pedestrians, and any reserves, regional reserves that we decide. So the TDA funds are held with the county auditor, who issues the payments throughout the year. And those payment instructions are issued by us, which you'll find on attachment E, our recommended payment instructions to the jurisdictions. So some key findings, what I've included in our report today on page 3 of our report, we have a nice figure 1. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that in red and blue, we have the transit funding, red being the federal grants that are covered, and then how much of transit TDA funding goes to RABA and the public transit system. And then the green is representing of our CTSA. And what I wanted to show here is that the CTA is a relatively good bargain considering the operating demands of the public region. Yes, thank you, Greg. Greg's showing the figure 1 for anybody who doesn't have it. I guess I could share my screen if you'd like. And another thing that we want to look at here is as operating costs continue to increase for alternate services like CTSA, it is a good investment to keep these non-conventional services around and funded. So we're looking for opportunities like our STA, or excuse me, our regional reserves to be able to cover the costs to keep these non-conventional services around. And that for when the CTSA operating costs exceed that off the top distribution of 5%. You can use the regional reserves to fund those needs. So that's important. And then moving on to page 4 of the report, we have table 1. So this is a good illustration of how the proposed 11 million almost TDA funding is going to be dispersed throughout the jurisdictions. So across the top, we have the different agencies, if you will, that are funded. And then as we go down the bottom, the different categories of funding. So you can see that SRTA admin off the top, the 5%, CTSA, the 2% non-motorized, and then we move on down the line for Article 4 and Article 8. So that is how those are distributed. And then just some last good graphs that we added in on page 5. We wanted to show you that the impact of COVID has had an effect on our allocations for CTSA and LTF this year, but we still are seeing findings that are allocations that are in line with the trend of previous years. And then for 5311 funding, we for that graph in the bottom, or in the middle, figure 3, we wanted to show that that throughout the years, 5311 funding has come to the county to cover those operating costs, and we want to continue to bring that funding source in so that we can use it to disperse to the different jurisdictions and cover those operating costs for Shasta County. And we want to make sure we're using those funds so that they aren't deobligated. So if you see in fiscal year 15-16 and the subsequent 2 years after that, we did have some funds deobligated, which are colored green. And we want to make sure that we continue to use that funding efficiently and share it throughout the region so that we do not have those go back to the state and they stay in the region. And then once again, lastly, figure 4, once again, the drop did come down. We did have streets and roads funding elevated by both a RABA repayment and some other stimulus funding that came in last year because of COVID. So there is a good drop, but it still is in line with what we've seen in the past. So that kind of runs through the graphs and tables of the report. And then if you wanted to see more detail on how that 11 million is being calculated, that's what you see in attachment D. It shows you the LTF funding, the STA funding, federal grants, those first transit funding requirements, and then a nice summary table of how each jurisdiction is getting which funding. So if you had any other questions, I can take those, or you can always email me if you'd like after the meeting. And we are looking for approval of both this attachment D for the apportionments and obligations, and also attachment E for the approval of the payment instructions to the auditor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we have a staff recommendation, or do we have any questions? by board members. And may we hear a motion?
This is Mary, so move.
Schrader,
Leonard,
second.
I'll second.
Okay, Mary Rickard moved and Leonard, I think you got the second. So a roll call vote. Amy, if you would, make sure everybody's still here.
Okay. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are moving then to item 11, which is to approve fiscal year 2020 and 2021 low carbon transit operations program. Sean Tejan.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me just fine?
Yes, we hear you and see you.
All right, that's good. Yes, good afternoon, Chair Watkins, Board of Directors, partner agencies, and members of the public here with us today. I'll be brief on this item. Number 11 is to approve allocating low carbon transit operations program funds towards expanded Shasta Connect services for fiscal year 2020-2021. Each year, SRTA is allocated a portion of LC-TOP funding for the region based on the proceeds of statewide cap and trade funds. For the upcoming fiscal year, the allocation is just over $183,000. As outlined in the staff report, LC-TOP provides funding for new or enhanced public transit services that look to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve mobility. There is an emphasis on services that serve our low-income communities as well as disadvantaged communities. In our case, in our region, we do have low-income communities that don't have any disadvantaged communities defined by the state. Over the last few years, it has been a current priority of the board to use these funds towards Shasta Connect services that are provided by Dignity Health Connected Living on behalf of SRTA, and namely towards the Sunday on-demand transit service demonstration project. Consistent with actions made last year, staff is recommending that this year's allocation go towards the what we call year 2 expanded services. First, the expanded Sunday on-demand transit project, which provides operations funding so that we can expand that service to the cities of Shasta Lake and Anderson for an additional year through December of 2022. And also for the expanded CTSA rider eligibility project, which expands the eligibility of riders who can ride the rural public transit service provided by Dignity Health Connected Living to anyone over 18 years of age, as well as minors in limited circumstances. Funding for these two projects is helping to offset ongoing impacts of COVID-19 on the services, as well as supporting the board's desire to work toward fully funding the Sunday on-demand transit project with LC-TOP funds and to help meet additional rider needs in the rural areas of Shasta County. With that, that is all I have for an update for today. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Any board members have a question or a comment for Sean?
I do. How's our ridership for Sunday going? Are we seeing an increase?
Yeah, so we just got the April ridership information. We did not operate Easter as it was a holiday. We had 180 rides last month, which was an average of 60 passenger trips a Sunday. It was our highest 3-week period since we relaunched November 1st. So the trend is going up. So that is encouraging. It's still, on an average, it's about 30 rides less per Sunday than what we were seeing towards the end of the service when we first launched before COVID. But that's at least encouraging that we're getting up to those numbers as quickly as we are.
Thank you.
Anybody else? May we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, made by Aaron and seconded by Mary, was it?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
All right, roll call vote. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Lozano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to item 12, which is approve the release of request of proposals for operation of the Salmon Runner bus service between Reading and Sacramento. So Jennifer Pollen.
All right, good afternoon. Let me get my PowerPoint up in a moment. Is everybody seeing the slideshow?
We see it. Yes, there we go.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Chair Watkins, board members, partners, and members of the public. I'm Jennifer Pollum, Senior Transportation Planner with SRTA, and presenting today on the Salmon Runner operations. Item number 12. Ooh, no, it's not doing that, sorry. Item number 12, staff recommendation is to approve the release of a request for proposals for intercity bus service operations between Reading and Sacramento. This is also known commonly as the Salmon Runner. First off, I'd like to address recent comments in local.
Hey, Jen, can you go
yeah.
back to the slide view? We're getting the more limited view instead of the slide full screen slideshow.
Yes, I can. Let me do that again.
The first slide came out and then it went back to small.
I'm looking to see if I can.
There you go.
Yeah, I just don't have my. I'm not able to have my notes in front of me. That's okay. So there's three things that I wanted to address right off the bat. Is that recently there have been comments in articles in local publications regarding the Salmon Runner, and I wanted to clarify a couple of things in there and hopefully clear up any confusion there might be. This staff report that's before you today is for operations of the Salmon Runner bus service. It does not use the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program funding of $8.6 million that was awarded in 2018 for zero emission vehicles. Secondly, the idea that on route charging along the I-5 corridor, we don't have funding in the current grant right now, that $8.6 million Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program for on route charging. We do have depot charging in Reading and Sacramento. We did apply for in the past and were not awarded Federal Transit Administration LONO grant for on route charging. And if the board so determines, we could continue down that path. Sorry, I'm gonna have to. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that this staff report that's, or the recommendation that's before you today is bringing 4 round trips daily back into Reading. The Amtrak Thruways bus service administered by the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority historically had 4 round trips that went through Chico and then to Red Bluff and Reading, and only allowed rail ticketed passengers on that. They did cut that service back to 2 round trips daily, and this Salmon Runner service operations that we're proposing would bring 2 round trips along the I-5 corridor. So we would, the end result being that we would have 4 round trips daily to start off with the goal of increasing that further if that's permissible. So the big news actually for this recommendation, or the new news to this, is that the Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transportation has committed $470,000 for a 2-year pilot project for operations of the Salmon Runner. The other funding sources that are in this table before you have been presented before, but that close to $500,000 is new for a 2-year pilot project, which results in 1.3 million. You can see there at the bottom, or closer to 1.4 million total. And that allows us to start up the 2 round trips daily, the right-hand column, and you can go to the bottom and see that we would have a balance at the end of the year with fare revenue. If you can look right there in the beginning where it says operational support commitments, and you can see the different 600,000 on the right, 200,000, 100,000, and then you'll see that 235,000. This is for 1 year of operations, and that 235, if you multiply it by 2, gives you the 470,000 from Division of Rail and Mass Transportation for a 2-year pilot project. So the total amount does, you know, we could actually use more of that in the first year if we needed to start up service. And I'm making it quick and easy today. So our staff recommendation is to approve the release of a request for proposals for operations of the Salmon Runner bus service between Reading and Sacramento. And an aside, I'm really excited about this project and continue to be.
Okay, do we have any comments or questions on this item by board members?
We do have a public comment.
Yeah, I want to do board members first. Yeah, Kristen.
Oh, I was going to offer to hear what to suggest that we hear what the public comments are, and then I would have a comment after that.
Okay. Do any other board members have a question or a clarification for Jennifer? So Jennifer, I understand that this really isn't increasing any new diesel buses. This is converting them from the Amtrak and from the San Joaquin JPA to the Salmon Runner. And when would this start if we approve it?
Based on contracting, hopefully early fall.
Okay.
We'd head back at, it would require a special meeting of the board to approve that contract.
We have had a long presentation here on the future of hydrogen fuel cells. And if we start this with diesel buses, does that give us a chance to test the need and the ridership before we would convert to zero emission buses, or where are we in those aspects?
Sure. So the board knows, or if you look at the attachment about the history there, it gives a lot of reference to, I think, 16 different staff reports on this topic. We have gone out in the past for a request for proposals for purchasing battery electric vehicles, and independent modeling showed that the vehicles currently available would not be able to meet that need. So right now with the Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transportation, we're transitioning that scope of work, remaining to be zero emission motor coaches, but transitioning it to be hydrogen fuel cell and the development of a prototype hydrogen fuel cell motor coach.
Okay. The other question I had is the rail service comes into Reading in the middle of the night. And how is our timing of the 4 Salmon Runners accommodate people that get here in Reading in the middle of the night?
It actually does not. That is a service that goes between Seattle or British Columbia and down into Southern California. So that's kind of a complimentary service that brings people to this area on the rail service. The bus services between the Amtrak Thruway bus service and the Salmon Runner would be during the business hours or during daylight hours.
Okay, well, let's go to the public questions or comments and hear those next.
Okay, Mr. Ed Merrick.
Thank you. As to Jennifer's comments, I'm sorry I didn't hear her last name.
Pollen. Yes.
Pollen. It sounded to me very much like what she said was, we made an error in our grant in only asking for charging infrastructure on the ends of the line, when for electric buses, you really need it at the interim stops. If that is what your position is, the way to fix this is to correct the proposal to a more practical one, not to abandon it. Back to what you're doing now, I asked you to take other action earlier in the meeting because I didn't want to really say it exactly this way. But if you do accept this, put this out for bids to diesel buses, you will be calling something the Salmon runner and using the very technology, greenhouse gas belching technology that threatens salmon with extinction as the name of this program. This will open not only this board, but the entire county open to ridicule. Sorry to be blunt, but that's really the situation here. Electric buses are perfectly capable of making a 150-mile trip. The fact that somehow a misconception came in your project early on to convince somebody that they couldn't is no excuse for compounding it with further error. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Chair Watkins, I have some comments.
Well, Kristen, is there another public comment we should go to first before you want to comment? Or would you rather comment on this one now?
No, that's fine. I'll wait till all public comments.
I do not have any additional comments.
Oh, okay. We only had the one. Okay, so you're back on, Kristen.
Thank you very much. With all due respect to any public comments that we've had this afternoon, I would highly urge anybody who is watching or participating in this meeting, as our staff, Jennifer, referenced 16 staff reports that are clearly available to the public. And you will see that I don't believe there were any errors made by our staff in any applications. We have been fully briefed on every step of this process, and for any public comment to be made, both on a news cafe or directly to city council members or to SRTA board members, without actually checking the factual information that's clearly available in the public, is disrespectful. Please be aware of the facts before you start telling us what we should and should not do, and be more respectful of all of the work that has been done to this date for the past several years. And so I think that what our staff has done, what the board has been privy to and has been in communication with directly with in many different reports, I think we're doing what we can that will benefit the community. It may not be as much as we had hoped to in the beginning. And I disagree strongly that for any public comment to come in and just make blatant statements that are not factually correct about how you can tell us that an electric bus can make it from Reading to Sacramento without giving us any factual information, which is contradictory to what we have been told for years about our best efforts to get electric buses, is disrespectful. Get the facts first before you make presentations. And then I believe that our staff will be making available some more opportunities for public comment to be open and shared with the public about what's really going on and what are the facts. And with that, I make a motion that we approve staff recommendations.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, but I want to give anybody else a chance to comment or reply or ask questions here.
I would just like, you can see this in the record, but the vehicles that we're looking to purchase are high floor motor coaches, not low floor local transit buses. And so that's one clarification. I think that's really important to call out. And the other one being that we're also looking to make this a service that anybody will want to get on and not have it be a long service. If I drive my personal vehicle down to Sacramento, it's about 2.5 hours. And for people to get on this bus, we need to keep it close to 3 hours, I believe. So stopping and charging en route for extended periods of times in small rural communities such as Red Bluff and Orland, without many things to do or amenities, is asking a lot of somebody.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any other board members have a comment?
Yeah, this is Mark, and I do have a question. In the RFP, that I read that the winning entity will be required to own the vehicles. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so we're requiring them to purchase the latest technology. Is that in there?
They don't have to purchase. They would, what the vehicles that they provide, you're talking about probably the, I imagine you're talking about the, drivetrain, what type of drivetrain it's using. So there are other parts that we are requesting additional technologies, but for the diesel versus electric, it'd be up to them what they provide.
Right. And well, I get that part of it. My question is that we require them to the latest diesel technology and not bring a bunch of old buses to the program.
Correct. That would, I believe that CARB actually, the California Air Resources Board oversees that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Chair Watkins, we have Sunrise Reading with the comment.
Okay. Sunrise Reading.
Here they come.
Thank you. My comment comes in the form of a question. Again, I had to come in the meeting late, and I apologize for that. So I may have missed some of the preamble to all of this. But if I'm to understand one of the other public comments, the concern is that we will be using diesel engines on something called the Salmon runner. I also understand what Kristen was saying so clearly about what the facts are related to electric range. So my question is, if diesel engines were to be used, is there any sort of way to guarantee that that can be revisited, or that there's a way to upgrade from that as the technology becomes available? Or are we going to end up being stuck with a fleet of diesel vehicles and that's it? That's our Salmon runner. And so that would be, I think, a big concern. Certainly, I would share that concern, and Sunrise Reading would as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So Jennifer, his question is how long is the contract for these diesel buses? And if as technology goes along, how would we convert to a more clean vehicle?
Yeah, we'll be writing that into the contract that as the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program vehicle purchases come online with SRTA-owned vehicles, then those would become part of the contract with hopefully a decreased cost in operating expenses. As we provide the vehicles, their costs for operating and not having to use their owned vehicles would decrease the costs. We're looking to, as I said, go to a prototype hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. That's prototype, so the development of it is likely years away before we acquire it. So I believe we're going to be looking for a 5-year contract on operations with opportunities to extend for a couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Any other board member have a comment? I would offer my own then, in that I believe that we are not creating any new diesel buses running. There were 4 buses. We're going to have 4 buses. I think using the name Salmon Runner does not degrade it. I think that helps generate ridership so that when we do get either a hydrogen or a battery electric bus, that we will be able to convert to that when the technology is there. I also, it's a little more than 150 miles. It's more like 165 miles. And the way to charge interim along the way would be with an induction charger on the top of a vehicle, so you don't actually have to plug it in. And an induction charging station is very expensive, and we might need 2 of those, and that's beyond the cost, of what I understand, of this grant. So I totally support us using CARB approved buses in the interim to get this off the ground. It will actually reduce vehicles on I-5 and will reduce total emissions by having these buses. And it's an interim step to get to what Ed and others are proposing that we should eventually get to, but the technology, we're just ahead of the curve a little bit. So I'm all for approving this. So we have a—
Hey, Greg.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you made me think of something as you were talking. I agree with all your comments. And I find what I'd like to know, and this will help us, is by doing this, we'll discover what kind of ridership we will have. And if it's a lot of people, then it makes sense to put more money into it and try to go electric, whatever it might be. But let's say it turns out to be very poor. Then maybe we find our answer and we don't spend millions of more dollars on a system where only 2 people unfortunately ride on it. So I just think that's an important factor too.
I totally agree with you, because the San Joaquin Joint Power Agency's ridership has been dismal. And that's one reason they're willing to put 200,000 into this each year. Yes. Any other comments by a board member?
Well, actually, one last thing. One of the reasons that the ridership has been dismal is because they require that the rider in Reading to have a paid train rail trip at the other end. And it's difficult to even find their website to even buy the ticket in the first place. So they don't make it easy. And so, Greg, I think you're spot on. And thank you, Leonard, for your comments. I think, again, and staff, Paula, you've made 2 excellent additional points that, there's a certain type of coach that we need for the travel on I-5. It's not the same that you see in downtown, city streets. And the other thing is that I think, as someone who frequently travels to Sacramento, used to frequently travel to Sacramento, we want to mirror the same amount of time that it takes somebody driving in their car. And so I think what we have done, Greg, is we've been a little ahead of the curve, but we're supported by the state in hoping to see this be something that benefits our community for all the reasons that you stated and others have said that their concerns are with our environment. So I think this is a good conversation, and I know that our staff were very willing to sit down with anybody who has questions and concerns and wants to see more and learn more about this project.
And Jennifer, I think you have done a great job in keeping it going. And you might also, I understand you're going to hold a workshop in—
Yes, thank you for the reminder. Yeah, you could find a news flash on our website regarding a Salmon Runner public workshop this Thursday at 4 via Zoom. So go to our website and you would be able to access that. I've also sent it out as a press release to different publications.
I think that's very appropriate to have the public workshop, because there's still unanswered questions and people would like to hear more. And this gives the public a chance to weigh in a workshop type of setting.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the staff approval as presented. So let's have a roll call vote.
Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes, so it
Thank
is
you.
approved unanimously. So we're going to skip item 13 because we never have a 13. So we are on item 14, approve matching funds for Victor Avenue and Cypress Avenue Active Transportation Program Project. Kathy Early.
I'm trying to make sure I unmute here.
We can hear you.
You just re-muted yourself, Kathy. You'll have to unmute again. Okay,
Are we good now?
yes.
Okay, sorry about that. That's funny. I didn't even touch anything. So strange. Anyway, good afternoon, folks. I'll try to make this short because of the time here. The city of Reading received an award from the California Transportation Commission, an active transportation award for their Victor Avenue, Cypress Avenue ATP or active transportation project. The award was $7,822,000. In the grant application that SRTA helped the city prepare, SRTA committed to up to 15% of the project eligible project costs with board of directors approval. That amount is $1,493,015. SRTA basically at this point in time has highway infrastructure program funding available to it. Over the last 4 years, the U.S. Department of Transportation has provided funding to the region, and it can be used for a whole variety of projects, of which this is an eligible project. And so staff is recommending using those 4 years of HIP, Highway Infrastructure Program apportionments, and also suggesting that for the shortfall, which is $44,240, that it be funded from a future HIP allocation if it's available. Alternatively, if not, to use non-motorized funding or some other appropriate source. So staff recommendation is to approve the use of the $1,448,775 of Shasta Region HIP funding as matched to this project, and for matching the additional $44,240.
Okay, do we have any questions?
Yes, Greg, I have a question. This is Mary. Kathy, could you do you have a brief description of what this project looks like?
I don't have a good description, but I'm going to revert and roll that forward to my colleague, Keith Williams, who is more familiar with working on these active transportation program projects.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and promote Keith.
Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, members of the board, members of the public. I can share my screen and show you the map of the project. Can you see this map?
You could zoom in more on it, Keith. It's pretty small.
Okay, yeah, this is on the fly. I didn't know I was gonna have to do this, so let me see if I can pull up a.
But you should add, Keith, that this is on our website.
Oh, okay.
And
That's
so
right.
all of the projects that have been awarded recently, you'll see fact sheets and information like this. And so that's for the public's benefit too, if they want to go and look at these projects in more detail.
Okay, I can look it up online. That's fine.
Okay. I'll stop sharing here. So, yeah, I don't know if you would like a description still, but it's City of Reading's Victor Avenue project, and it's a shared use path for much of the project, and also some bike lanes and sidewalks there along Victor and Cypress, and then Alfredo Way behind Lowe's there.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's say, I think we had a motion, or did we?
No, well, I don't think we did, but Chair Watkins, if I could just, I know there's a late hour, but I want to just remind share my appreciation for the partnership that SRTA helped engage with our local entities to help using a consultant for Cycle 5 help generate these projects. You know, several of these ideas have been years in the making. I have to tell you that I grew up within a half mile of the area, or less than a half mile of the area that we are now going to be improving vastly with better pedestrian bike safety, areas. So, I mean, I just couldn't help point out that this is a great example of the collaboration of SRTA and Reading, the city of Reading, much like the Cottonwood project that was also awarded. And just that this will have a huge positive benefit to this part of the enterprise area that, you know, that I grew up in, actually, and I know that road really well and how bad the pedestrian and bicycle access has been for decades. And I won't say how old I am. Oh, where I used to ride my bike there and not in a not a very safe way. So I'll make a motion.
Kristen, yeah, make the motion.
I'll make the
Chair Watkins, we do have a public comment.
Okay, well, let's see. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Then I'll
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, so we'll go ahead and accept the public comment.
Okay, it's Rachel Hatch, and she's coming online now.
Hi all, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I just wanted to, if I may, read just a brief segment of the letter of support that the McConnell Foundation provided for this active transportation program application when it first came together with the city of Reading and SRTA and others. We were writing at that time as a neighbor of the VCAT project. That's our term of endearment for it, the VCAT project. And, you know, the McConnell Foundation has held a property that's behind Lowe's to part of that project site that Keith was noting for more than 20 some years, searching for the best and highest use for a project on that site that would neighbor this active transportation project. We believe that we've found it in partnering with Hill Country for their Center of Hope project, and then further partnering with K2, the city of Reading, Shasta County, and Hill Country in developing some permanent supportive housing that will be located there. We're in the stage of the capital stack development, so you don't see shovels in the ground yet for that stage of the project that you do for Center of Hope. And what's important about that links to transportation is this is a really important synergy for people who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, chronically homeless, in need of supportive mental health services in an area that's located right by grocery stores, employment opportunity, transportation, the bus lines that are near there, et cetera. So to have this improved route along that area, it feels like it's a really important synergy, and it's an example, you know, in the 4 years that I've been at the McConnell Foundation, it's an example of where there are pieces in transportation and housing that are coming together in a way that's really meaningful for meeting the needs of the community. So just wanted to say a word of thanks for that.
We appreciate that, Rachel. Okay, Amy, assuming we have no other public comment, go ahead and a roll call vote.
Excuse me, Chair Watkins, who was the first and second of this item?
Schrader and Browning.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with a roll call vote. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes, and thanks, Rachel, for the support from McConnell.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on item 16. We're going to receive a presentation on resilient Shasta extreme climate event vulnerability assessment and provide comments. Michael, you're on.
I'm sorry, I believe we may have skipped an item.
We got to go back to 15, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, did we miss something on it?
Yeah, we didn't do 15 yet. 14 was the last item.
Oh, Keith had two in a row, didn't he?
Yeah, you missed something, the whole
I
thing.
did. Okay, I just said, Keith, we're done with you. Okay, so 15 is authorize a technical service agreement for Shasta Regional Active Transportation Network. So Keith.
Hello again. Yeah, the California Transportation Commission recently approved up to $24.7 million in highly competitive active transportation program funds for the Shasta region. So delivering agencies may build 3 of the 6 projects for which they sought funding. Consultant assistance funded by SRTA played a key role in that success, as we were talking about just a moment ago. A Caltrans grant funded consultant assistance for public engagement and conceptual drawings, while SRTA funded consultant assistance for grant writing. We are gearing up to repeat this strategy so we can continue to fund much needed walking and biking projects in the region from the Active Transportation Program and other grant programs. This time, we would like to consolidate efforts and hire just 1 consultant team for engagement, conceptual drawings, and grant writing. Using $467,000 from another Caltrans grant and $300,000 from SRTA's regional non-motorized program, the project has a not to exceed budget of $767,000. SRTA and delivering agencies have finished evaluating proposals received from 4 vendors who responded to our request for proposals back in February, as well as follow-up interviews. And Kittleson and Associates ranked highest overall based on their high quality staff, technical expertise, proposal thoroughness, and value of services. As needs are identified, SRTA and Kittleson and Associates will develop tasks and negotiate fixed fee budgets based on the rates from their proposal for individual work authorizations. The project schedule will be defined once suitable active transportation projects are identified and matched with appropriate grant programs. Staff's recommendation is that the board of directors authorize the executive director to enter into a technical services agreement with Kittleson and Associates to carry out the Shasta Regional Active Transportation Network project for a term ending June 30th, 2025, not exceeding $767,000. And I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, any questions for Keith? Then let's have a motion.
I'll move to approve it.
Second by Rickert.
Okay, Amy,
Thank you.
have a roll call vote.
Okay, we will go with roll call vote. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we will go again to the next item, which we just mentioned about extreme climate event vulnerability assessment and comments.
That's a mouthful, isn't it? We just call it Resilient Shasta for short. I'll be respectful of your time today. I know this is a long meeting. So I just want to say that this is a presentation to the board on the vulnerability assessment component of Resilient Shasta. We hired a consultant, Energetics. We have Chris Gillespie here on the call, who is representing Energetics. And he's going to give a presentation on the findings of the vulnerability report.
Great, thank you, Michael. Thanks everyone for having me. I appreciate everyone sticking through the meeting. I will try to be brief and I will try to keep it upbeat, but I think the first thing that I would say before we dive into this presentation is that this is the first part of a larger project. This is the bad news component of our project, and hopefully the next component of the project will be the good news component. This is phase 1 of the Resilient Shasta extreme weather mobility adaptation plan. The vulnerability assessment is intended to identify hazards, evaluate exposure, and incorporate public and stakeholder outreach into that. The second phase of the plan will focus on the adaptation elements, and we'll dive into that at a later board meeting. But with respect to your time, I'm going to jump right into the details on this project. The methods that we use here are taken almost word for word from the methods used by Caltrans in their climate change vulnerability assessments. We've added some elements to make this more tailored to the Shasta region, and we've also done more in-depth evaluation of impacts, but at the high level and even at the detailed level, this is pretty similar to the Caltrans District 2 assessment. We looked at 3 time periods. So we looked at the historical experience, that's not a future time period, but we also looked at the near-term future. That's the climate that occurs between 2010 and 2039 in the projections. So when I talk about the year 2025, that's what I'm referring to. It's this 30-year period, and it's the average weather in between 2010 and 2039. In the midterm in 2055, that covers the period 2040 to 2069. And at the end of the century in the long term, in 2085, that covers the period from 2070 to 2099. Now, all of these are based on projections that come from the California Climate Change Assessment. These are all based on data that comes from CalAdapt and other sources used by the California Climate Change Assessment. So these are all grounded in the same comparable data sources as the state and state agencies are using. We considered 2 emission scenarios. You can consider these a low and a high emission scenario, but really what they are is the upper and lower bounds of what we expect greenhouse gas emissions to do over the 21st century. The lower bound, what we call the reduced emissions scenario, assumes that global emissions, that's not just American emissions, that's global emissions, so everything that every country in the world does, peak in 2040 and decline after. The reason we consider this a lower bound is even at present, the US is not committing to peaking emissions in 2040. So realistically, this scenario is not going to happen. Likely, the high emission scenario, the unconstrained emission scenario, also won't happen. That scenario assumes that global emissions continue to rise without any reductions over the course of the 21st century. So realistically, we're looking at somewhere in between these 2 scenarios, but the reason we frame these is not just because that these are the scenarios that are kind of the gold standard to use in practice, but also because they give us a good idea of what the best case and worst case outcomes are. So with that being said, this study really hones in on 6 key vulnerabilities. The first is projections to wildfire probability and severity show very serious and severe increases throughout the Shasta region in the coming century, particularly in areas with key transportation infrastructure. All-cause evacuation planning does not address key mobility gaps at present, including those for vulnerable populations and in rural areas with limited transportation options. Increases in extreme temperatures, think heat waves, are likely to accelerate wear and tear on the roads and vehicles, impair use of pedestrian and cyclist and transit systems. Projected increases to extreme precipitation are likely to intensify current hazards related to localized flooding, as well as the road delays and closures that may occur due to snow, particularly in that I-5 corridor. Flood hazards are also likely to increase with extreme precipitation, particularly on uncontrolled streams. And I will note further in that we do not have the flood hazard data from the Central Valley Project for the Shasta region's dams. So our flood analysis is based largely on existing FEMA hazard analyses, as well as uncontrolled streams. And then finally, 6, the increases in extreme precipitation and wildfire hazards are likely to increase the risk of landslide activity on burned slopes during extreme precipitation events. I'll go into that in more detail later, but there's a lot of maps and data here. As I jump through these, I just want to point out all of this is in the draft report that you should have access to. It's on the Resilient Shasta website right now. So jumping really quick into wildfire, these 4 maps show you reading left to right and then top row, bottom row. Over the course of the century, the modeled probability of wildfire to occur in each of these squares, well, they're more rectangles, but each of the grid cells shows the modeled probability of a wildfire per decade. And you see that scale escalates from 0 to 10% all the way up to 70 to 80%. What we're saying is that if you have a 50% decadal probability of wildfire, there is a 50% chance that within a decade you will have a wildfire. And this isn't talking about small fires. This is only talking about very large fires. I believe larger than 400 acres. So what we're seeing is in the projections, the increase in probability of wildfire, but also this figure shows the increase in the severity of those wildfires. So this is a a somewhat convoluted metric, but within the models, the area burned, given the existence of a wildfire, indicates the severity of those wildfires. So really what we see is under current conditions in the southwest corner, where you do have that at present high wildfire probability, the severity escalates much less than in the central band of the Shasta region, where you see really significant increases. Now, I'll point out that both of these figures that I showed you are the high emission scenario. This is the unconstrained emission scenario. So if you look at the reduced emission scenario, the most important takeaway is that you have large increases in both probability and severity by 2055. That's the C in these figures. That's the lower left-hand corner here. But by 2085, the increases in severity and probability stagnate. They kind of slow down. So that's the most important takeaway when it comes to the difference in emission scenarios. You get rapid increases in 2055. In the lower emission scenario, you see those increases kind of flatten out and level out. In the high emission scenario, they continue to grow. So moving on, for evacuation routes, evacuation planning resources were not available for this study. So what we're looking at in the adaptation plan in particular is the key mobility gaps, and we're trying to solicit more public input on that. We have a public meeting tomorrow for this project, but for multiple highway segments, there are which have been used in previous evacuations that we were able to discern. We know that there are acute hazards related to fire and flooding that threaten those roads. So it is important to understand that some of the roads that are currently used for evacuation routes do face some of these hazards. Jumping through to temperature, this table shows what is called the heat wave temperature. So when we look at the temperature in the Shasta region, it's already a hot and dry region. Really what we're looking at by the end of the century is approximately a 10-degree increase in what's called the heat wave temperature. The heat wave temperature is the hottest 7 consecutive day period, looking at the average temperature of those 7 days high temperature. So right now, given current history, in Redding, that's 106 degrees. In Shingletown, that's 97. If you go up into the Sacramento River Canyon, up in Pollard Flat, that's 99 degrees. For all of these locations, you can see both in the low emissions and the high emission scenario, that's the left and the right columns. And in each of the projected future periods, you could see how that temperature changes over time. What we see is that, like I was saying in the low emissions versus high emissions scenario, in 2055 to 2085, you see continued increases in the high emission scenario and sort of flatter increases in the low emission scenario. Another consequence of increasing temperatures is reductions in what are called freeze-thaw cycles. The day-night, overnight it gets cold, it freezes, in the daytime it thaws. This has huge consequences for roads in particular, but it affects a lot of different transportation infrastructure. Currently, Redding sees almost no freeze-thaw cycles, and in the projected future, it is not expected to see any. But what's really interesting is in Shingletown and Pollard Flat, for example, here, we see significant reductions in freeze-thaw cycles from the historical period, which covers a period from 1975 to 2004. So really, this is the 1990 is the central year of that period, compared to the 2025 period, which we're already partway through. We see significant reductions in freeze-thaw cycles in these lower areas, whereas in Bernie and Old Station, the reductions don't really increase significantly until you get to that end of century area. So you're still going to have lots of freeze-thaw cycles at higher elevations, but the perhaps silver lining is that we see significant reductions in freeze-thaw cycles in lower lying areas. For extreme precipitation, we see projected increases in almost every scenario and almost every time frame. This small map here, I know this is confusing, but well, that's even less helpful. In this small map, what you see is Shasta Lake down here at the bottom, and this is the I-5 corridor up through that Sacramento River Canyon. And each of these grid cells shows the projected increase in what would be a 25-year precipitation event. So a precipitation event with an amount of rainfall that or snowfall that would be expected once every 25 years, or 4% chance of happening each year. So this is showing between a 10 and 26% increase in the volume of precipitation in what is a current 25-year precipitation event. This is by mid-century in the high emission scenario. If we look at the top row here is the 2055 timeframe, and the bottom row here is the 2085 timeframe. And the columns are the 25-year, 100-year, and 500-year precipitation events. So what we see is that in the very extreme, in the 500-year precipitation events, the projected changes are slightly smaller, but they're still, for the most part, positive. And they are increasing significantly by that 2085 timeframe in the high emission scenario. The smaller changes in that lower emission scenario are also there. So again, important takeaway, if the globe manages to reduce emissions, you can avoid some of these much more catastrophic outcomes in the long term. I would just point out here again that we're looking at in the range of 5 to 25% increases in the volume of a 500-year precipitation event. So that would be a really significant precipitation event. Jumping through to flood hazards, for this assessment, we looked at the current FEMA flood zones in order to identify and just screen which transportation infrastructure facilities would be subject to a flood hazard under a 100-year or 500-year floodplain. The gray in this map is the 500-year floodplain, and the blue is the 100-year floodplain. And this is just downtown Reading. What we found is that all major highways in the region have at least one segment exposed to a 100-year floodplain. So that's a floodplain under current conditions you would expect to see in a 100-year streamflow event. However, with the increase in extreme precipitation, because the flood hazard modeling that FEMA does is it takes a long time to get updates, and they don't do prospective modeling with projected future precipitation conditions. What we expect to see generally is that municipalities are moving towards using the 500-year floodplain as a general guidance for where to avoid putting critical infrastructure. We're not making a recommendation on that here, but for the purposes of planning, we've included the 500-year floodplain here. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have the flood hazard mapping that has been done for the dams, but that is a potential area of future cooperation locally. I don't think that my former boss, who now works at DHS, is likely to give me that data anytime soon. For landslide hazards, this is another area where we did essentially a screening analysis. Landslide hazards has not been modeled in the county, or I'm sorry, in the region. And it's a complex, obviously modeling landslide hazards is a complex process, takes into account a lot of different factors. What we did though is we looked at slope, in particular because wildfire, destroying the vegetation on slopes, and extreme precipitation events that follow that, as Santa Barbara County learned back in 2019, is a recipe for really devastating landslides. So what we looked at here is really just the slope of hillsides above key transportation facilities, and we really honed in on 3 key areas: on 299 along Whiskeytown Lake and west of it, between Buena Vista and Round Mountain, and in the I-5 corridor, particularly in the southern portion here. Or sorry, in the southern portion of the Sacramento River Canyon here. Another, don't have a more detailed map. But anyway, the next steps for this project in the June 21 timeframe will be completing the draft adaptation plan. And then by October, we should have the Resilient Shasta Extreme Climate Event Mobility and Adaptation Plan, which will pull together all these findings, as well as the recommendations from the adaptation plan, and serve to help update SRTA's projects and regional transportation plan. And I believe that is all my slides. So I'll pass it back to Michael if you want to add anything, but thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
So like Chris said, this was just a real summary level. We're having a public event tomorrow starting at 4 o'clock, in case you're not tired of Zoom meetings, where we delve much deeper into the findings and take a look at how we could see impacts to current transit routes and that sort of thing. So if you have the interest and the time, I highly urge you to attend. If not, it's all there in the report. And if you have any comments, questions, or directions, we would be more than happy to take them.
Okay, this was just a presentation. There's no action taken on. Do any board members have a question or a comment?
I just would say it's a great presentation, a lot of information to soak up. I appreciate you guys bringing it to us and looking to forward to having a chance to review more of it later. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would have a comment then. This is one of my pet areas. How this is all based upon computer modeling. How accurate or how reliable do you believe your computer modeling is for these future events?
Yeah, that's a great question. The sources of modeling it is all at some level computer modeling. The sources of information all come from what's called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's assessment reports. That's the UN body that does the big climate change reports once every 5 years or so. So the source, at the source of all of that is what's the global modeling community calls the CMIP5 project. Really what that is the top scientists across the world participate in these regular modeling exercises. And the reason they do it together is because they try and improve on each other's processes. So what they're regularly doing is taking the models that they used last time, comparing it to what actually happened in the intervening years, and kind of refining their models. And they've gotten very good at it. One of my grad advisors actually worked on one of these models, and they're fascinating how they work. But at a high level, they're not simulating weather. They're simulating climate. When it comes down to the level of weather, that takes a second set of analytical processes. And the way that that's done at the local level, which is what the results that this relies on, takes those climate model temperature and precipitation and wind impacts, and it downscales them, it increases the resolution basically to apply them to a locality like the Shasta region. And the way that it does that is it takes historical weather patterns and it matches those to the weather patterns, or it matches those high level characteristics like temperature and precipitation at the local level. So really what we're seeing is what would happen to local weather if we had those very high level climate parameters applied in historical events. In terms of the fire, this is actually California's way ahead of the curve on fire modeling, and the models are more speculative. There's less certainty in the fire modeling than there is in the temperature and precipitation modeling for certain. However, it is fairly accurate in the very near term. So just in the last few years, which is really the only amount of time the fire models have been around, it's demonstrated its utility. But I don't think as California residents, as Shasta region residents, I don't think that I need to emphasize the accuracy of fire modeling.
I would say you're not going to give me a % accuracy on the future, but I'd give you another comment then.
Sure.
You talk about landslides, and generally after fire events, it's not so much as landslides as it is sediment transport after a major fire as the soil becomes hydrophobic. And so seemed like it ought to be sediment transfer or transport and not landslide. And the second thing that I like to hear there is that you're saying that the extreme rainfall event for a 25-year event is going to increase 10 to 25%. And you show inundation there in the Redding area. So if you predict the 25% storm events are going to increase, are you proposing that Shasta Dam be raised 18.5 feet then to help protect against the 100-year flood?
I simply can't comment on that. I haven't done any analysis on the dam's retention capacity or the watershed. So like I said, the flooding analysis is based on the FEMA flood mapping. We essentially stayed away from trying to model any type of flooding for that reason. The Shasta region's hydrology is, as you know, almost entirely controlled by dams. So it's very difficult to say anything without any information on the dam's operation capacity. So I really can't make any recommendation about dam operations or changes to their infrastructure.
For the
On
last 75 years, Shasta Dam has eliminated any major flooding in the Redding Red Bluff area. So maybe they need to raise it 18.5 feet if it's going to increase in the future. So anyway, I don't know if the Winneman Indians will be happy with your analysis that we need more flood storage, but I support it. So.
All right. Well, I will say one other thing on your point about landslide. This is a fault of mine. I use the term broadly when I talk about debris flows, mudslides, landslides. In general, when you have material coming down a slope, this is the problem that wildfires plus extreme precipitation create.
Yeah, and it's huge because that sediment flows into Shasta Lake and starts filling. It was only predicted to have a 200-year life, but the sediment actually has been a lot less than anticipated. But with major fires, we could have more sediment. Anyway, I find it very interesting, but I do highly question the reliability of the information, but it is interesting to hear.
All right. Well, I hope you join the meeting tomorrow. There'll be more detail in the presentation tomorrow.
Any other comments from any board members? We are then on item 17 to adopt the fiscal year 21-22 overall work program, or OWP. Dan Wayne.
Bear with me here and I will promote him. And I'll get Chris off the hot seat here.
Thank you, Chair Watkins. The annual overall work program and budget for all of our planning activities has been prepared and it's been reviewed by our state and federal partners as well as local agency partners, and it's ready for your approval. That's it.
Move to approve.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any comments? I do have a copy of it here. Thank you for printing that out for me. A roll call vote, please, Amy.
You're muted, Amy.
You're on mute. There you go.
I know, got it. Thank you. So we had a first by Browning and a second with Modi.
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
let's call, let's roll call. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that was our last item, and hopefully nobody has any comments or suggestions that they want to discuss now for future meetings.
Greg, I do have, this is Mary. I just want to make a comment is,
Well played, Craig.
very quickly, our board meetings, our last board meeting last week lasted till 6:45. And I think we just need to take that into consideration as we have these sort of meetings on Tuesdays often. And luckily today we didn't have a board meeting, but I don't know if Dan wants to think about that. But with the way things are going, it seems like our board meetings are lasting a really long time, and it's going to be perhaps hard for Leonard and Joe and I to make it to the SRTA meeting if it's running late.
Well, I expect Joe to speed everything up for us, right, Joe?
Absolutely. It's my plan.
And just so we're clear, and Baron Browning in the future.
Okay, copy that.
Maybe at one of our next committee meetings, this can be discussed, because that's been on my mind as well. Not only could you not show up, but in June, we're probably going to go back to having the meetings at the board chambers. So we won't have a place to have the meetings either. And I wonder about maybe deviating from Tuesday or something, but we'll lay out some options to see what's best.
Okay, as I promised, we'd be out before 6. We got 1 minute to go.
You told
Good
me
job.
5:15.
Yeah, well, that kind of went by the wayside. You asked too many questions, Leonard. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Good job.